So welcome, Chef AJ, to Raw and Cook Vegan. It's nice to have you.
Thank
And
you.
and so, can you tell us a little bit? Just let's just first say, what is your website? You've got
Sure.
a book that you've
Yeah.
written, or
Got a
more
book.
than one.
Here's my book.
Yeah,
We're
beautiful, unprocessed.
right.
Okay,
Got another one coming out soon called The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss. My website is the word eat followed by the word unprocessed. So eatunprocessed.com. I do have a
okay,
television show on Foodie TV, Foody TV, called Healthy Living with Chef AJ. And I do sort of what you're doing, video podcasts almost every week that I also call Healthy Living. So if you could look at the Chef AJ YouTube channel or sign up for my mailing list, we'll send them out to you.
all right, fantastic. Now, to start from the beginning, tell me a little bit about how you were raised. Was your family at all conscious of diet? What were you eating when you were a kid?
Jewish food.
Okay, okay.
Very delicious, very fattening food. You know, lox and bagels and knishes and kreplachs and, you know, everything that starts with the letter K, as Dr. Goldhammer said. You know, so we ate the standard, you know, we ate kind of like the Jewish standard American diet. You know, salami, you know, Sinai 48, those kind. We kept kosher, but kosher doesn't necessarily, well, certainly doesn't mean healthy.
Yeah.
And so that's what I ate, at least the first 11 years of my life. And what was interesting is I moved to California, to Los Angeles from Chicago when I was 11 because there were a lot of racial tensions in Chicago after the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and it wasn't safe anymore. I was getting assaulted just, you know, going outside my house. So my parents needed to sell the house, so I moved to Los Angeles to live with relatives, and my aunt was Swiss, and her mother lived there, and she was French. And so I went from a rich diet to a richer diet because now I was eating French food every night, you know, Gruyere cheese and just, I mean, delicious food. How the French stay slim, I have no idea because this food was just, I mean, there was vegetables in it, don't get me wrong, but it's so rich with cream sauces and, you know, alcohol in it and things like that. So I went from a really high-fat diet to an even higher fat diet. And, you know, these foods were delicious, obviously, but they were disease-promoting. No wonder so many people in my family had heart disease and diabetes and cancer because that's what we ate. And when I was 17 years old, I attended the University of Pennsylvania to become a veterinarian. And I've always wanted, I kind of like wanted to be a vegetarian growing up because I didn't really like eating meat. I couldn't eat it if it looked like it. So one good thing about my mom is, and also one good thing about being Jewish is there was a lot of meats we just never ate. So we never ate pork, so I never ate bacon or pork.
Right.
We never ate shellfish, so we didn't eat lobster, crab, clams, shrimp, mussels. So there's like a lot of stuff that people like that, like, I never had it. I don't like it. So, you know, yeah, what'd you eat? You ate a little red meat, you ate chicken. I didn't like fish because it just smelled and looked weird. So it wasn't like I was eating gobs and gobs of meat, but I couldn't eat anything, Paul, that looked like an animal. So like a rib, like a breast, you know, I could eat chili because it was a soup with little things in it, you know. But for some reason, psychologically, I couldn't eat meat that looked like meat. And even when we did have meat, like I would always have to eat the end piece that was burned beyond recognition because anytime there was like any pink or blood, it would make me sick. So I sort of had that affinity, and I don't know where it came from because it's not like I knew a single vegan or vegetarian until I think I was 27 years old, but I kind of knew.
Maybe a past life.
Yeah,
Past
you know,
life.
I would believe that. I would believe that.
Yeah.
But I do I knew that I loved animals, especially the domestic ones that I shared my home with. And so I went to be a veterinarian, and like we were assigned a vet to work for.
Okay, now wait.
Oh yeah.
Hang on one sec,
Sure.
Chef AJ. Before I let you continue there, tell me up until 18, with these relatively high-fat diets, how would you characterize your own health?
Well, I did not have any health problems that I knew of at the time. You know, I mean, I was a kid, so I don't, you know, sprains and things like that. I didn't even have, believe it or not, I didn't even have a single of one of the childhood diseases until I was 27. So I would characterize my physical health is good, but my emotional health wasn't so great because I was the fat kid. And even though I wasn't like bullied because I was really smart and really popular with the teachers, but it's, you know, you have that, especially as a female, and we're talking the 60s now. We're not, you know, now 1 out of every 3 children under 18 is obese, but back then there weren't a lot of fat kids, and I was one of them. So that was, I don't want to say it was devastating. Yeah, I guess it was devastating. You know, when I look, I mean, I try not to think about it. I did actually a lecture about this at the McDougall Advanced Study Weekend on YouTube called From Fat Vegan to Skinny Bitch. So I guess it really was devastating at the time, but I try not to think about things that make me sad. But physically, I think my health was okay. I don't remember being sick or in the hospital. You know, I had like tonsils like when I was little, but that's,
So
you know,
you had your tonsils removed, or you
yeah,
had?
yeah. Well, actually, I
Okay.
had tonsils. I was born with tonsils. I did have them removed when I was like 5 years old. That's what they were doing back then.
Okay.
But other than that,
So
you know, and a ankle sprain, things like that, I don't remember a lot of sickness. You know, at least not physical sickness growing up.
did you get like the annual flu or cold around, in the winter, or?
Boy, I don't remember getting sick a lot, and I think part of it is because my grandfather and my uncle were doctors, and if we did get sick, my mom would just call them up. So I don't ever remember the luxury of being sick because I don't want to say we didn't get sick in my family, but it was sort of like, shake it off, go to school. And I remember trying to be sick. It's so funny because my mom always used to say, you can't go outside with wet hair, you'll catch a cold. And I remember like I really wanted some time off school and I put wet hair out and went outside in Chicago. Nothing happened. So I couldn't get sick if I wanted to back then, So I don't remember really being regular sick.
How about acne? Any acne?
This is interesting because I know some healthy vegan people that still get it, which I'm believing might have a hormonal thing. I didn't have, the one thing I remember though, now that, because I don't think about that, is that I got my period very young, which if you are eating dairy, you will, because you're supposed to get your period at like 15, 17, 19, like they do in other cultures. And
Right.
I got it very young at 11, which is not good because then, you get breasts sooner, and it's not good when physical maturity precedes psychological maturity. But one thing I remember, and if I had known then what I know now, is from the very first period, I had the worst cramps, like my whole life, up until changing my diet to a healthy vegan diet. And
Yeah.
and I mean, I know now that is because I had such a bad diet, because I'm not saying people don't get mild cramps, but I mean, I'm talking about the kind of cramps where you're doubled over in pain and laying down for, 3 days and taking like narcotics. And so when I think back to that, this could have been prevented if I had known the healthy version of the vegan diet. Because
Yeah, very interesting. That's a huge point I run into a lot. It's like menstrual issues and also menopause are like almost eradicated on the vegan diet,
Yeah.
Which is just huge. That should be like the headlines of the newspaper
Right.
every day.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. So let me
I'm
get you
still,
back.
I mean, I'm going to be 57 in a couple months, and I'm still waiting for what's supposed to happen at menopause. Like, so far, nothing's happened. Like, I mean, I get cold occasionally because that's just how I've been wired, but I haven't had a hot flash. I haven't had anything yet, and I'm thinking maybe I went through it and just didn't know it because I don't have any symptoms.
And if it's not too personal, can I ask you, are you still ovulating?
Well, I think okay, all right. It's not too personal because if what I say will help somebody, I had what's called an ablation when I was 47. Now realize I didn't change my diet to a healthy, really healthy diet till I was 48, and I'm almost 57 now. I started changing it when I was 43 after being a junk food vegan for 26 years. I stopped the white sugar and white flour, but it wasn't until I was 48 that I really started eating a clean, health-promoting diet. And so when I was 47, I had what was called dysfunctional uterine bleeding, where 2 weeks out of the month, I would have a period, which is way too long, and then you get anemic, and then you have cramps for 2 weeks. And so I had several opinions. Of course, I didn't have the opinions of the plant-based doctors that I know now, like Dr. Clapper and Dr. Goldhammer and Dr. McDougall. So I had this procedure called an ablation, which is not a hysterectomy, or that all my parts are there. But what it does is they either freeze or burn the uterine lining so that the egg can't attach. So I think I probably still ovulate. I just don't get a period. And if you've had cramps for, let's see, 71 to 8, let's see, 11 minus 47, 36. After having cramps for 36 years, this was truly a wonderful procedure for me. But I bet you, Paul, if I had adopted a healthy version of the plant-based diet, I probably wouldn't have had 36 years of suffering, and I probably wouldn't have needed that procedure. So,
no, hey,
yeah.
Hats off to you for doing that for 36 years. That's crazy. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the connection between that and diet until I took the Cornell course and learned all this stuff, and started reading this, like on Dr. Furman's website about patients he's helped with all this female stuff. And I mean, who knew? But it makes sense if you're taking a hormonal secretion of a bovine. Of course, you're going to have all kinds of weird stuff going on.
Yeah, exactly. So this is great. This is a huge thing that you'll be able to educate us on. So I'm going to take you back to where you were at 18. So you go into college, and you kind of had these, let's say, slight misgivings about meat. You never wanted to eat meat that looked like
No.
it was an animal,
Right.
with bones and stuff sticking out of it. So what happens when you get into college?
Yeah, well, dorm food, which, it's interesting because I went to college in Philadelphia, and one of the things I always heard about that was really famous is called Pat's cheesesteak. And and being Jewish, we didn't eat meat with cheese anyway. We didn't eat dairy with meat. But everybody raved about this. I'm not saying it's unfortunate, but I never got to have one because I literally went vegan like the first week of college, and I was actually 17. And the reason is I was working for a veterinarian because I was in the pre-vet program. I was on a scholarship, and that's like what we had to do. Like that was our we had to do that if we were on scholarship in pre-vet. And on the very first day of the job, he hands me an aquarium-sized tank of live salamanders. I don't know, there may be 40 or 50 in there. And he said, I need you to cut all their heads off. And these were like alive. And I'm like, well, why? And he said, well, I'm doing protein lens regeneration experiment in the amphibians, so I only need their eyes. And I'm 17, and I just, you see a guy in a white coat, and it's like, okay. And it took forever, and I really did decapitate one of them. And I mean, it was just horrific. I mean, salamanders don't talk, but they sure do bleed. And it was just like, I was like, oh my God, I felt so bad. I actually vomited. And so I went to student health, and I just said, can't, because, after that, if I had done the salamanders, he was going to bring the frogs out next. And I said, can't do it. And so they put me in the lab room where I just washed equipment for the rest of the semester. And I ended up not being a biology major because also I didn't want to dissect the rat and the cat and the frog. I mean, just by smell alone, I mean, that formaldehyde. And I didn't want to get a D, so I switched to like a French major, which was ridiculous. I ended up not even finishing college at that time. So I always joke that instead of being a veterinarian, I became a vegetarian, actually vegan at that time, 1977, but not a healthy one, a junk food one, which I don't recommend that. And that's like my passion, Paul, is like, again, it's not like I bash people for being ethical vegans or eating junk food, because I was addicted to junk food for 26 years. But I want people to know, especially if they're starting out and aren't already addicted, eat whole foods. It's just so much easier, because once you develop a taste for that junk, and there's never been more vegan junk in human history than now. When I was a junk food vegan, my junk food was like potato chips and French fries and soda pop. There wasn't Gardein meat or Daiya cheese, and I'm not bashing those companies. Don't get me wrong; they can be great transition foods, but they're still fake foods. They're high-fat foods, and they're not health-promoting foods. And especially if you're struggling with your weight, these aren't like the best things to eat. And you can really develop a taste for them, and then just end up eating 100% of your calories from processed food, even though it's vegan. And where do the fruits and vegetables and the whole grains and legumes come in? They don't. At least they didn't for me until, a few years ago, so I'm sorry to say. And I developed the beginning of colon cancer even without eating dairy and animal products, because my diet was just full of junk.
Okay, I love this point. This is a great point. So I respect ethical vegans.
I do too. I am an ethical vegan too, but
right. And I, from my perspective, there's three major, really great reasons to be vegan, which are health, environment, and ethics.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I sometimes hear ethical vegans arguing that what's with all this focus on health, and I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
If it's going to benefit your health, why not focus on that? And if some people who don't care as much about the ethical aspects of it do care about their health, why not invite them to be vegan for health?
Yeah, because I actually heard, I don't want to say the person, but someone said, well, if you're not vegan for ethical reasons, you shouldn't bother being vegan. And when I spoke at Farm Sanctuary, I said, the last time I checked, the pigs, the cows, and the chickens really didn't care why they weren't being killed. And, with all due respect to ethical vegans, there's a movie called Earthlings that few will watch. How many people went vegan from seeing Earthlings versus how many people from seeing Forks Over Knives? Every day since the movie came out in 2011, I get at least 3 emails from somebody that wants to take my cooking class. And I always say, well, where'd you hear about this? I saw Forks Over Knives. And, when you're healthy, that people want to want to know what you're doing, and then you say, well, I'm vegan, you know, I'm whole food plant-based, I'm vegan. So again, I mean, I love ethical vegans because the work they do, especially on the front lines. I did that a little bit in my 20s. Oh, I can't even do it. I mean, I have a rescued animal, but I applaud them and I appreciate them. But I kind of feel like the old Rodney King line, can't we all just get along, you know? I mean, it doesn't, who cares? You know, even if you went vegan for the environment only, I mean, if there is such a thing, you're still helping. I mean, you're helping all three. And that's why it's such a beautiful way of eating, because you are doing what's going to help your health. You're going to help the health of the planets and certainly the health of the animals. What other diet style can you say all that about? None. None of the other diet styles do anything for anyone, do any good. So it's just a beautiful thing to be vegan, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I mean, in my work, I'm not, you know, like when I'm out there, I don't use the V word a lot because I speak at places that aren't vegan. So I speak at spas, and if I said right away I'm hardcore vegan, they're not going to have me. But if I say I'm unprocessed, which half the time they don't know what that means, and then I get there and I'm teaching a cooking class, oh, this is vegan, oh, this doesn't have oil or sugar or salt, oh yeah, it's unprocessed. But then when the food is good, you know, it's okay. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm not ashamed of it. I almost always have a vegan t-shirt or a vegan necklace on, not when I'm speaking in that world.
No, Chef AJ, I think this is a huge point. And I think folks like Dr. McDougall, they make a point to focus on plant-based or whatever, just because that, you know, in the public consciousness, there's this kind of, you know, these kind of old notions about the term vegan.
Yeah.
So, so I totally get that. Yeah.
I wish we had another word. Just not. I mean, not even. I don't know what the word would be. Like my favorite word is puppy, but that wouldn't make sense. But just a word that I don't know what it is. But a lot of, because I don't like words that are often mispronounced. Like vegan, when they say vegan, it's not vegan. You know, I want a word that is not going to be mispronounced for a change.
Maybe simply compassionate would be a good replacement. You know.
Yeah, something like a compassionate eater. I like that actually. You know, I go to a lot of veg fests, and there's this is my main concern, and this is how I want to appeal to the ethical vegans that are not healthy eaters, because there's people that are both. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Gene Bauer, looking the way he looks and exercising the way he does, is an ethical vegan and also very health conscious. But not every vegan looks healthy. And by that, I don't mean you have to be thin, but people know how you project yourself. And if you're trying to get other people to be vegan, that's the reason you want to look your best, whatever that is for you, because it's much more enrolling to other people. Because if you see, you know, even somebody that's just, you know, like real, I don't want to make physical, like, what the word is, assumptions, but however people perceive us, if we don't look let's say vibrant, that's what I'm talking about. Doesn't mean you have to be thin. But if you don't look vibrant and healthy, then people are not going to want to do what you're doing. But if you do, and they say, because, you know, okay, give you an example. Like, I'm wearing makeup today because I was supposed to take a plane and it didn't go. I don't often wear makeup, but even when I don't, like, people say, oh, your skin is so beautiful. What do you use? And I said, well, I really don't use anything. I said, it's because I'm vegan. It's because I eat a lot of vegetables. And so that's an idea to get people to think about it, you know?
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. Okay. So we'll go back. You went to college. You dropped out of the veterinarian thing, which I totally get. I mean, I wouldn't want to chop salamander heads off either. And so then what happened next? You and by this time you are vegan. And tell us, you call yourself a junk food vegan.
I was.
Can you kind of just briefly characterize what you were eating? I mean, did you ever have salads? Did you?
No, I don't think, except for some broccoli, I don't think I ate a single fruit or vegetable till I was about 43 years old. What did I eat? I ate Coke Slurpees, because as far as I know, Slurpees are vegan. Extra vanilla syrup. Drank a lot of Dr. Pepper. Pretty sure that's vegan. Ate a lot of chips. I ate a lot of candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream. They were vegan. I knew how to make them. I knew how to cook and bake. So it was horrible.
Did you eat like rice and potatoes, stuff like that?
Oh my gosh, I wouldn't have been, I got to almost 200 pounds in my 20s. I wouldn't have gotten that size if I was eating rice and potatoes. I was just eating sugar, sugar, sugar with a little flour and oil mixed in, a bunch of caffeine, junk food. I was a food addict, and I didn't know it back then. I just, you know, where was everybody? Where was Dr. McDougall back then? I mean, I'm sure he was around, but there was no internet for me to find him.
Well, let me ask you this. You did change your diet when you became like 18, 19, so you did become vegan. So you did stop eating all meat, and I guess you stopped eating all cheese and eggs.
Yeah.
Did you gain weight?
Yeah, I gained
Did
weight. I got, well, I mean, because I was eating such a horrible, I was eating just bread and pasta and, not, I mean, not whole grains like rice and beans and potatoes, just cake. I remember eating a lot of cake, it's so funny because, um, and I'll be honest, I was a cheating vegan. And what I mean by that is that, yes, I didn't eat dairy and I didn't eat eggs, but if there was a birthday party and there was a white cake, I would not look at the label and not eat it. Which, like, now, well, now I wouldn't even eat the cake. But what I'm saying is, I wasn't
yeah.
diligent for the first 10 years, from 77 to 87. I ate no meat, eggs, or cheese, but I wasn't diligent. If there was a cookie, I would eat the cookie. And of course, now that would never happen. But I'm being real honest here. For the first
Well,
10
I like
years.
that. I like that, AJ. And one thing I'd like to hear your thoughts on in this regard is, what about when you go to a friend's house? They have it's a holiday. You got relatives there. They prepared a lot of foods.
Yeah.
They put a plate in front of you that has some things that you wouldn't normally eat. What do you do in that?
Well, now they wouldn't do that because I am so vocal about never eating anything you don't want to eat. And so one of the things I do is I almost always eat before I go anywhere. I'm not going to leave. I'm going to take a chance that there's not going to be appropriate food. The other thing I always do is I have food in the car just in case. I carry a cooler that looks like a woman's purse, which I can even have on me. So I do not leave anything to chance anymore. And generally, not generally, always, I call ahead because nobody's going to put a plate of food in front of me anymore. Because I mean, I make videos like this on what to do when you're faced with this situation, and I feel bad for people because women, especially, they're people pleasers, and what they often will do is not wanting to hurt somebody's feelings. They'll eat something that they don't want to eat, whether they're hungry
Right.
or not. And so that's not going to happen to me anymore. And if it did, like, let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to think outside the box. Like, I don't know, I was in another country speaking in another culture and that happened, I would probably just say, oh, this looks delicious, thank you. I'm allergic to whatever's on the plate.
Right.
But,
right. Okay. Gotcha.
but what I would
Okay.
definitely not eat animal. I would never go back to eating animal products. I mean, if I was shipwrecked on a desert island and what they dropped was chicken nuggets on the 50th day, I mean, I would not eat animal products just because I was hungry. In other words, I'd have to, and I don't know if I ever would. I mean, they're so gross. I didn't like them before I was vegan. I don't like the texture. And that's what I don't get, Paul, about all these fake meats. It's like, why would I want to replicate the texture and the taste of something I didn't like in the first place? So
right.
That's what I'm not understanding about it.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do like what you said is that they can be useful transitional foods.
Yes, they can, especially for children, for example, because I don't think, especially young children, if they haven't got yet addicted to these, Dr. Barnard has a great book called Breaking the Food Seduction, where he talks about cheese, meat, sugar, and chocolate being the four of the most addictive foods. And like with a young kid, the analogs taste so good. I mean, the day of cheese, it really melts. And so with a young kid that's not yet hooked on the opiates, from the casomorphines, these can be really great. Or for people that you're trying to win over, like for instance, Miyoko Shinner, she sells her cheeses now, Miyoko's Creamery. But before that, she had a wonderful book, she still does, called, I forget what it's called, Artisan Vegan Cheese, where she can make cheese look just like cheese. And so these are great things, like if you're entertaining, because people really won't know, and the taste will be the same. They're not going to get that hit of opiate because there's not going to be any of the casomorphines. But no, I think there's definitely a place for these foods. And again, if your health allows for them and you're happy with your weight, it's just that I can't eat them, and my husband can, I can't. They're just too rich for me. And but again, who knew if I had just become vegan today, I'm pretty sure that's what I would probably be eating too, because they're delicious. Absolutely delicious.
Satisfies the psychological thing. Yeah. All right, so back to your biography. So you leave college, and tell me about what led you to becoming a chef. And I know that you're also a comedian. I want to hear a little bit about that.
Oh boy, I have had such an interesting. I admire people, Paul, like my veterinarian, who they know what they want to be. They get out of college, they go to vet school, and he's like almost 70 now, and that's like the only job he's ever had. And it's like, wow, very successful too, both in his career and financially. I've had just sort of this kind of thing, because that's what
let me say, AJ, I admire people that follow their heart, and perhaps this veterinarian was following his heart, and that's great if he was. but it sounds like
Right.
you definitely follow your
Right.
heart, and I love that.
Right,
So
right. Well, you know, it's funny though because I think about I don't know if you know who Dr. Doug Lisle is. He wrote The Pleasure Trap, one of my
yeah,
favorite books,
yeah.
and I use him from time to time as my psychologist. And and I'm getting worried because I'm going to be 60s and I don't really have like what I would consider financial security. And he says to me, he goes, "Well, that's because your entire life has been about artistic display instead of about making money." And I'm like, "Oh shit, you're right. I better start making money now." But I do tend to, that never was a big priority to me. I'm only thinking about it now because I'm getting older and I'm like, I see what happens to older people when they don't have money. But
I can relate.
yeah, yeah. So, I always thought I wanted to be a vet from the age of 4, and then when that didn't happen, it was like, well, then I thought, okay, well, I kind of wanted to be an actress. Actually, I wasn't so much going for comedian, but what happened was, is because I was fat, they said, they in LA, it's. I was just talking to a client the other day how it doesn't matter how thin or how good you look in LA, it's if you're, there's a certain like I'm too fat and old for LA already. I'm like I'd be washed out in the entertainment industry. But even when I was in my 20s, the casting directors would say, well, you're too fat to ever have a leading role. It didn't matter like how good of an actress you were, but well, you're too
Yeah,
fat. The best you can hope for is like the best friend, like Rhoda Morgenstern on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And this is what you're told. And so I leaned more towards the comedy, which I actually liked anyway. But I remember doing dramatic acting scenes like in my class. I studied with a teacher named Joan Darling, who was an Emmy Award-winning director of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And I
huh.
remember like one acting scene that I did where I was playing actually a retarded person. And I had got prosthetic teeth done, and I went to the Goodwill store and I got different clothes and I wore a wig. And I remember that I got a standing ovation. And at the end, where like the teacher critiques you, they said, well, who are you? Like they didn't know that I was me from the class. And like that was just a wonderful moment. And it was like, wow, I guess I really can't act, but everybody's saying I'll never get these roles. So I leaned more towards the comedy, the stand-up, which I liked. But it's hard to be a famous actress or comedian. I mean, think about like with what is there, there's how many hundreds of thousands of people in the Screen Actors Guild, but think about how many roles there are. So
Yeah, yeah.
I had a small amount of success. I was on the Tonight Show a few times with maybe 4 different hosts. I was on David Letterman. I had done a few sitcoms like Ellen and Night Court and a couple of commercials, but not enough to make money to live on. And
Yeah.
so I tried different things. I was going to be an advertising copywriter. I was very good at that actually, and I was going to move to Pittsburgh actually because they had a lot of advertising agencies there. I had family there, and I was accepted to Carnegie Mellon because I never did finish the University of Pennsylvania. Then I met my husband Charles, and it's just funny how you can't really plan. I mean, I guess you can plan your life, but it doesn't work out always the way you plan. So you just have to be open to whatever is there. But I will
Yeah.
say that being vegan is the thing that I've done the best, and I've done it the longest for 40 years, and I've done it consistently. And I would say at the end of the day, when people say, what are you most proud of in life? I would say that, because every meal that you don't eat meat, how many animals are you saving? And
Oh
over
my
40
God.
years,
Can you imagine?
yeah.
Can you imagine the quantity of water you've saved? Since you, I mean, it's just unbelievable.
And
But
I
okay,
take extra long baths to make up for it. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm just...
So tell me, what brought you to this point of transition from being a junk food vegan to a health conscious vegan?
Yeah, well,
So,
I probably
and also,
never, a health crisis. I probably would have just still been a junk food vegan, except that I started bleeding internally in 2003, and I was diagnosed with precancerous polyps. Now, I hadn't eaten meat or dairy for 26 years, but I also hadn't eaten a single fruit or vegetable, which you got to have. I had basically a fibrous diet. I mean, like if I pooped once a week, that was a lot. And right there, that sets yourself up for colon cancer right there. It's not, and this is why I want people that are ethical vegans, that are junk food vegans, to know that it's not just the absence of eating animal products that will assure that you have health. It's the eating of the fruits and the vegetables, especially the vegetables that nobody wants to do, that's going to make you healthy. And so what happened was, when I was 19 years old, I have asthma. And when I was 19 years old, I had a routine operation, I think I was getting a cyst or something really minor removed. But for whatever reason, they did it under anesthesia. I was supposed to go home that same day, but I got allergic to the anesthetic. And I woke up with a team of respiratory therapists trying to get me to breathe.
Whoa.
And so I was in the hospital instead of a half a day for 6 weeks. And I never forgot that experience. And so I developed an actual, not just a fear, but like a phobia, like that is beyond, I don't know if the doctor could help me, of anesthesia. And so when they diagnosed me with the precancerous polyps, I was having a sigmoidoscopy, but because my colon was so dirty, if you will, even with the prep from years of abuse, they couldn't safely remove them because they would have bled and gotten an infection. And they told me I had to have surgery, like the kind where they cut you open. And I said, I'm not doing that. There's like no, I mean, if I was in a car accident to save my life, I would probably. But so I researched spas. Now, I wasn't trying to get healthy. This is the funny part of the story, is that I had this magazine that I picked up a long time ago about discount spas, and I'd always wanted to go to a spa. My dream was to go to Canyon Ranch and Rancho La Puerta, which is why it's great to have dreams, because I'm actually a regular presenter now for the last 5 years at Rancho La Puerta, and next year I'm going to be a chef at Canyon Ranch presenting. But those were too expensive, and so I found this magazine, and it said, well, for $875, you could go to this place for a week. And I'm like, well, hey, I can afford that. That's like $125 a day. And it was called the Optimum Health Institute. Now, I didn't realize what it was. I thought it was just like, oh, it was literally a magazine that said cheap spa or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I could afford this. It's in San Diego. I can take the train, and it'll give me like 8 days just to kind of chill out and think about what I'm going to do. And I get
and before you go on, AJ, I just want to highlight how courageous I think that was, because the doctors, they have this power, and they try and funnel people into surgery, and you're like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So hats off to you for that.
Yeah. I'm too afraid. I mean, hey, listen, I went to a pedodontist till I was 35. I am not a good, I feel bad for my doctors. I really, if any of you are watching, God bless you for putting up with me, because I am the biggest contrarian. I am one of these people that like dots the T's, cross the T's, read everything. I don't just, when my doctor says to jump, I don't say how high, I say you jump. And then if you live, maybe I'll jump. Because they're still trying to get me to have colonoscopies and mammograms, and, no. Show me the evidence. And I send them the stuff from the Cochrane Report and McDougall and all this stuff. And they're like, well, and I'm like, no. I said, if you want to give me that Oncoblot blood test now where, they can test the blood test for cancer, I'll do that. I'll do anything non-invasive, non-radiation. I get my teeth clean. I'm not an idiot. Because I didn't go to the dentist for years, and that was a big, big mistake, mainly because I was phobic also. I'm like, I am scared of anything medical. So,
Well, there's justification for that.
I think so. I think it's a good, healthy fear to have.
You go to this spa, and you're thinking it's just an average spa, but it turns out to be something different.
It's a healing center, and it's an amazing place. And, if I had known of True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, which was in existence, I might have gone there instead. But I didn't know about it. There was no internet, and I went to this place, and it was lovely. I went to the one in San Diego first, and then the one in Austin. The one in Austin's much smaller, so you get a little bit more attention. There was, what they do is they give you raw food, and it's free of oil and sugar and salt. There's no processed food or animal products. And I believe it's based on the Essene religion, which I think maybe Jesus was, and it's considered a nonprofit. And you're in class all day, literally from 7 in the morning till like 9 at night. And the classes are body, mind, and spirit classes. There's psychologists, there's nurses, there's chiropractors, but the food is basically a whole food diet that happened to be raw. So there were some high-fat foods, but a little bit of nuts and seeds. They make it into a seed cheese, a fermented food. We were doing wheatgrass. We were putting wheatgrass in places where you sit down, like called wheatgrass enemas. We were doing colonics were optional, but they were, what was it called?
It sounds a little bit like Hippocrates.
Yeah, exactly. And it, but it was, it's nice when you're in an experience like that with hundreds of other people, because you don't feel like you're so weird, first of all. But the other thing that was great, that was inspiring, is every Friday they brought in graduates that would give testimonials of how this diet changed their life. And there were people there, like I had pre-colon cancer. It wasn't even cancer yet. I was just told if we don't remove the polyps, you will get cancer. But there were people there with AIDS, brain cancer, Lyme's disease, lupus, all these diseases that would come back and say, I did this and I'm well now. And I thought, well, gosh, those are more advanced types of diseases, much more serious. If they did that, well, I should be able to do that as well. And it was just incredible, because here's the thing, Paul, like my whole life, I remember like when I'd go to doctors, because I wasn't going to vegan doctors, there weren't any back then. I thought that I had they always told me I was fat and to lose weight. They don't really tell you how, other than eat less, exercise more, which actually doesn't work, because when you understand calorie density, you can eat more and way less and not exercise if you don't want to. But I remember saying to my doctor in my 20s, I said, I think I'm a sugar addict. I think I have a real problem. He goes, oh, there's no such thing. They poo-pooed all that. But at the Optimum Health Institute, they said that the diet that we eat, whatever diet that is, has a profound effect on our health, how we look, feel, what diseases we get, reverse. And they talked about alkaline versus acidic, and that everything, even though I wasn't eating the typical American diet with the animal products and the dairy, and I wasn't anymore using coffee or caffeine or smoking cigarettes, all things that I did, I still had a very acidifying diet with flour and sugar and oil and soda pop and things like that. And they said that in order to be healthy, you need to be alkaline, and you're not going to do that with the foods you're eating. And it made sense. And the detox was hard. I remember having bloating and diarrhea and pain for like several days of the 8 days there. Probably I'd say the first 4 or 5, but it got better. And then when you do detox, you feel so good, and you feel so good in your brain. And I remember being very calm, and I remember it being a wonderful experience there. And I recommend it. And I also recommend True North. Maybe I recommend True North a little more, only because we've got those wonderful vegan doctors there, like Dr. Goldhammer and Lim and Clapper and Sultana, where you can actually get actual medical care. There's no medical care at Optimum Health, but hey, for the price, it's an amazing experience, and I'm glad I did.
Do they also conduct fasting at Optimum Health, or is it?
They don't do water fasting, but if the program hasn't changed, 3 of the days are like a juice fast. And and I don't think you have to do it, but I remember that's what it was. And the food, the food was it was very bland. It wasn't seasoned, which it was like salads and vegetables, and I don't remember there being any dressing whatsoever. For breakfast, I think you had watermelon juice or watermelon. It was very bland. And if that's not your thing, go to True North, because now they have a chef, Ramses Bravo, where you can have gourmet food three meals a day. But it was a good place. It was a detox. What was interesting is when I was there was a lot of, I don't know anything about sports, by the way, but I was told that a lot of the people were there from a football team, because I went there in the summer, called the San Diego Chargers, because I guess when you're a football player, you have to be a certain weight to play. And I guess these team members, because I don't know football players, like other people are like, that's whatever his name is, I know Joe Namath, right. But the team was there because they needed to drop weight quickly, and there was also celebrities there. So a lot of people use these places as a fat farm, which they're not really, but they are great for detoxing, and because there's no coffee, and also there's no television. So that is another cool thing about it, because like at True North, they've got this huge TV in your room, which is good because they want you to watch videos, but it was kind of cool not having that access. And when I was there wasn't even internet. We had internet like people had it. We didn't have this kind of internet, and they actually encouraged you to not look at the news and not, and that itself, when your brain isn't being assaulted by all the processed news, is very healing from that, because most of the time people are just on their technology, and for no other reason, it's a good break. But I do recommend people take a break and go to a place like that, even if they're healthy. True North is roughly the same price. It's $149 a day, because people do need to unplug, because even if you're a healthy vegan eater, there's stress, there's toxins in the environment. And I'm getting ready to go to True North for 10 days myself. I'm going to be working there, but it's still going to be great, because it's True North.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I want to go out and see it. I want us to have a facility on the East Coast like True North. That's kind of my dream.
You should interview Goldhammer. He's a wonderful guest. And apparently one of the doctors at True North either has opened up or is going to open up one in Ohio. I believe it's either Cleveland or Columbus. It's not going to be big like True North, because True North can hold, I think, 55 patients. It's only going to be a 6-bed facility, but there is going to be something very soon on at least where people need to fast, and be monitored.
I have interviewed Dr. Goldhammer. I loved him. He was awesome. Yeah. It's probably one of the best interviews I've ever done. He's just amazing. He's
my favorite person to interview. It's like he's just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask you quickly, when you entered this spa, You come there the first day. What do you remember? What your weight was when you entered the
Oh
spot?
God, I was like, I seem to always, before I ate a whole food plant-based diet, always gravitate to the 160s. That was what I weighed when I was 11. It did get up higher to like 180 and 200 for a while, but it just seemed like 160, 165. I'm 5'6" was what I could weigh and not worry about anything and eat whatever I want as much as I want of junk. And I think that was 2003. So that was, yeah, 2003 for sure. Was between 160 and 165.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what were some of the things you mentioned you had this kind of detox. You had about 4 days of
Oh,
like pain, suffering
GI.
detox.
Yeah.
Then you
Yeah.
felt clear. You started to feel better. So I imagine you probably lost some weight this
Yeah,
week at
you
the
lose
spa.
probably like 8 pounds while you're there, but some of it comes back because it's you're kind of not eating very much.
Right,
I would
right.
imagine what are you getting like 800 calories a day or something like that. So you start eating, and here's the thing: back then, it was about 3 miles away from Chula Vista, and they had just opened up this like amazing raw restaurant there called Cilantro Live. And on the last day, the second to last day is a talent show on Saturday night, which is really fun. And on Sunday, before you get on the train, everybody goes to Cilantro Live. So now we're eating these rich desserts with the nuts and the dates, and still way
Right,
better
right.
than what I was eating. But I'm sure that put more weight on. And I wasn't going there for weight loss, so I wasn't even thinking about it. But I do remember when
Right.
I was in my room every night, I would call my husband and I'm like, get me out of here, get me out of here. Because I was hungry at night. And I was
Yeah.
dreaming of vegan pizza. I was dreaming of this Greek pizza that they had in a restaurant here called Native Foods. And I really was. That's all I thought about when I was there. And there are people that get kicked out because they'll order a pizza or they'll have, if you're caught with any food there that's not their
They're
food.
smuggling
Yeah.
stuff in, huh?
Oh, and there were
Like a
people like in the alleys selling banana ice cream. I mean, it was like crazy that a lot of people, because also smoking, like some people go there to stop smoking. And
yeah.
if you're caught in your room, first of all, you're not allowed to eat in your room anyway. But if you're caught with any of this stuff, and they tell you this, you are kicked out immediately, and they do not give a refund.
Wow. All
Yeah.
right. Well, the reason I was asking you if you lost weight is it sounded like when you started talking about this that this was kind of a watershed moment in
Hmm.
terms of shifting you from being a junk food vegan
Yeah.
into a more conscious vegan.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about how things progressed in this vein. And
Yeah.
I imagine somewhere along the way you decided to start cooking.
Right. Well, that's exactly
So,
what happened. So when I got out of OHI, I'll be honest, the food wasn't good there. Like, and maybe it's gotten better, but I don't think it was there to be good. It was there to heal you. But
yeah.
we're learning now that you can make healing food that actually tastes, quite delicious and more flavorful, even without using
Thank you.
sugar, oil, or salt. And so what I did is I signed up for a raw food delivery service that existed at the time. I think it was called Seed Live Cuisine, Lisa Carlson. It was quite delicious, actually, but it was expensive if you did it every day. And then one day I said, you know what? If I'm going to keep eating this way, I got to learn to make it. I can't afford this. So that's when I took a leave of absence. It was October of 2003 from my job as an assisted living activity director. And I went to the Living Light Culinary Arts Institute to learn to be a chef. And I wasn't planning on being a chef professionally because I had a job and I liked my job and I was making good money at that job. But that's what happened. And it was really fun. Culinary school, super fun. And it was a wonderful experience. And I learned to make things. But again, what they do in raw food, unfortunately, because most of the people, unless they're following like Dr. Doug Graham or Robbie Barbero at the Mindful Diabetic or fruitarians, they're not just eating fruits and vegetables. And because they're afraid or for whatever reason don't want to get their calories from the most important food group, in my opinion, the starch, the potatoes, rice, and beans, they gravitate to the higher fat plant foods like the avocados, nuts and seeds, tahinis, and olive oil, which is delicious, and I can make amazing foods with that. But they're definitely not weight loss foods, especially for somebody that's already overweight.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up
Yeah.
because I think this happens to vegans sometimes. So they go, and especially probably 10, 15 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago, like you mentioned, the nut seed, what do they call them? Seed nut butters and stuff like that. Some of these vegan movements were incorporating too many high protein, high fat foods to compensate for the absence of animal products.
Right.
And so what has been your experience that what kind of problems can result from that.
You
If
can
you
get
go,
fat.
if you're trying to overcome disease,
Yeah.
and you're eating a ton of seeds and nut butters and
Yeah.
stuff, you're probably not going to overcome your disease, right?
Right. Well, especially if you have heart disease, if you believe what Dr. Esselstyn teaches, which I don't see any reason not to believe, or Dr. Ornish's program also is low fat, even though I believe he'll allow 6 cashews today. It depends on what your disease is, but even though nuts and seeds can be very healthy, they're still anywhere from 2,600 to 3,200 calories a pound. They're very calorically dense, almost as calorically dense as oil at 4,000 calories a pound, which means you can't eat a lot of them and feel full, and they're very high fat. You can eat, you could eat 10 times more sweet potatoes than you can peanut butter for the same, kind of thing. I didn't know you were going to talk about this, but I have these jars that I use in my teaching where I fill each jar with 400 calories worth of food, and 400 calories worth of peanut butter is like this much. Well, 400 calories of sweet potatoes is an entire pound, which is going to fill you up more. And I find that high fat foods are, at least for me and other people I've worked with, especially people that lean towards refined food addiction, they're so delicious, they're harder for us to moderate the use of. So whereas you'll eat a certain amount of salad or even rice and beans and be full, things like peanut butter, man, I think peanut butter is a drug. I don't know. I see more people having trouble with that than just about any other food because it's good. Especially if you roast it, and then if you salt it and put sugar in it, and so what happens is people are like, well, I eat PB too, they remove the fat. I go, yeah, they remove the fat. What they put in instead? Salt and sugar. It's still a drug, not a food.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Good point. So this culinary institute you went to, were they teaching only raw food preparation?
Yes, it was like a gourmet raw food. Sherry Soria runs it. Very talented and very nice school. I mean, I still recommend it for people that are wanting to learn that. And I'm thinking she's going online now and not having an actual campus. But I did learn a lot, and I learned a lot about cooking and well, not cooking because we weren't cooking, but about food preparation and how to use a dehydrator, which actually I do. It was a good experience. I mean, I really enjoyed it.
Now, did they raise this issue at all when you were studying there about
Not really, because they were all thin. I mean, Sherry Sorio is like 10 years older than me and gorgeous and petite, and her husband Dan, they were, but they didn't raise it. And, now I know they have some doctors there that are teaching, like the science of raw food, Rick and Karen Dina, who actually spoke at True North. So, and I'm sure that those doctors aren't recommending a high-fat vegan diet. But see, they ate very healthfully, like they would have green smoothies for breakfast, salads for lunch. They ate pretty much a very clean diet, and they weren't eating a lot of these designer things. They were teaching more of a gourmet style, but I don't believe that they were eating these every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these gourmet foods kind of fall into the same category as the vegan meats that you were talking about earlier. It's kind of like it might be a good transitional food because it might give you some of that satiation that you used to get, but there's definitely not something you should be eating every day.
Right. And also the familiarity that people seek. But see, here's the thing. So I'm a black and white person. And if I like something, I want it every day, or at least I want to know I can have it every day. And that's why it's hard for me to have treats because they're so good that I want them every day. That's just my personality, compulsive, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. And that's why it doesn't work for me to have treats.
No, I think that's a very human trait. And I think that's why the junk food industry is so successful. Because people want to eat that stuff. It tastes good.
All the time. Bet you can't eat just one, right?
Okay. So, but I love that you had this training, and so can you talk a little bit about what you've learned along the way in terms of comparing a raw food diet and a cooked vegan?
Yeah. So everything I've learned somewhere else. Meaning, like, I didn't learn this here, but one of the things that really I found interesting was a book recommended by Dr. Lyle and Dr. Goldhammer's wife, Dr. Morano, and it's a book called Catching Fire by Rangham. It's not the Catching Fire Hunger Games series, but this book. And it's about, this guy's not a vegan. He's, I believe, an anthropologist, and he spoke at the McDougall Advanced Study Weekend, and he talked about how cooking has made us human. So when I was in the raw food world, they were like, well, we're meant to eat raw food. That's what our ancestors ate. Well, if you read this book, we've cooked our food longer than we haven't. And according to this book, that's what made our brain grow. And according to this book, all species, even if they don't cook their food, will prefer cooked food when offered. And I thought that was the most interesting thing, because you take like a snake who kills its prey and swallows it whole. They don't have any way to cook their food. But if you do experiments with that snake and take whatever his prey was and cook it, 100% of he's going to eat that. And so
Interesting.
our ancestors, most of their time on Earth, couldn't get enough calories. And that's why nuts and seeds and avocado could be so valuable. They were seasonal because when they saw them, they would gorge, but they weren't getting these high-fat plant foods every single day. And there certainly wasn't any oil throughout most of human history, and there's no oil today in nature. And so with the cooked food, that's how we get more calories. It's much more calorically dense. So, for example, 100 calories of salad. A pound of salad is 100 calories, but a pound of cooked steamed vegetables is 200. And so we do prefer more calorically dense food. That's just for survival. And then the more calorically dense, the more dopamine is released. And so that's the idea about cooked food.
Okay, that's very interesting. The more calorically dense, the more dopamine is released.
So that's why we have oil at 4,000 calories a pound and chocolate at 2,500 calories a pound. We get more dopamine, more pleasure. This neurotransmitter is produced in the brain than if we eat, kale at 100 calories a pound or apples at 200 calories a pound. And if you think about it, processed food did not exist in nature for any part of human history. It wasn't until we started processing it. So the only calorically dense foods in nature were the nuts and seeds and avocado, which were seasonal. They weren't every day. But now we can take an olive and make it into olive oil and have a food or a food-like substance without fiber or water or nutrients that's 4,000 calories a pound. So even though all eating stimulates the production of dopamine in the brain, these more calorically concentrated foods produce more dopamine. That's why we say they taste better. It's not that. It's that we say we like them better because we're getting more dopamine. So
very interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting. And perhaps might shed some light on Parkinson's or illnesses that have dopamine receptor issues.
Right, and they take drugs actually that give them dopamine, and it's all interesting. I mean, I learned this in The Pleasure Trap. It's a great book by Goldhammer and Lyle, which talk about this, and but think about it. Raw food in nature, there's not going to be oil, and that's one of the things. A lot of the raw food is used. Well, it's coconut oil. Well, it's still 92% saturated fat, and it's still 4,000 calories a pound.
I know you're not gonna go out and pick like 500 pecans and eat them in one sitting.
Right.
You're not gonna crack walnuts with your teeth. 500 walnuts. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, but this is where I disagree with them because they're determining the healthfulness of a food based on solely if it's raw or cooked. And I disagree with that, because they talk about how, well, there's enzymes in our stomach, digestive enzymes or metabolic enzymes or whatever they say, and that if we cook the food, we destroy these. But Dr. Clapper, who has a wonderful DVD at True North called Digestion Made Easy, says that we have hydrochloric acid in our stomach. So whatever we eat is going to be destroyed anyway. It doesn't matter. And so whether we cook the food or not, and it's true that when you cook your food, you lose about 30% of the vitamins and minerals. But if you cook it with water and steam, and I drink the broth. Like when I make vegetables, I love that pot liquor. It's warm, it's delicious, or I make soups and stews, so I don't think I'm losing that much vitamins and minerals by cooking my food. I mean, I don't think you should fry it or grill it really, but just steaming, or using a pressure cooker, anything you lose, you're eating. And even though I live in California, where right now it's colder than ever. It's like 60. For you poor people. I was supposed to fly to Detroit today, where it's like 28 and snowing, but my plane was delayed, so I'm going tomorrow. But I think when you're 100% raw, you're going to be cold. I mean, I was cold all the time when I ate only raw foods, and it just didn't work for me. And I didn't have the satiation that I do now, eating mostly cooked starches like potatoes and rice and beans.
Yeah, it seems much better suited if you're like in a tropical environment.
Like Costa Rica.
But I would like to say that I have interviewed a lot of raw vegan folks, and some of them do claim that they feel best on that diet, and some people who have illnesses see the most rapid results when they apply that kind of diet in a healing way.
And it healed me. And here's the thing, I'm not here to bash it if it works for you. A great resource on this is Frederick Patnaud. I interviewed him. He really knows about this because he can see both sides. And if it works for you, do it. The thing is I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you eat the raw food diet in the healthful manner that some of these raw foodists are doing, which is just fruits and vegetables, that's one thing. But I don't think, when you're eating desserts made out of cacao and almond butter and agave and coconut oil, that's a whole different kind of raw food diet. And so for people to be eating those, because there are some raw foodists that are incredibly overweight, even obese. I was still obese as a raw foodist that will not eat a sweet potato or broccoli because it's cooked, but yet they'll eat these hyper palatable, high caloric things because they're raw. To me, see, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But I think we should still eat raw food. I think people should eat salad every day and raw vegetables every day and fruit every day. How much, I don't know, what does Brenda Davis say, the dietitian? At least half your calories from raw foods.
Great.
You know?
And since we're on this kind of general topic of processing, what's your take on using smoothies, using a blender? Or
I used a blender for years trying to get off Coke Slurpees making green smoothies, and I think they're fine if the operative word is green, because what happens again is people make a green smoothie with coconut butter and cacao nibs and peanut butter and all these things, and it's really just a milkshake, and there's no green in the green smoothie. So if you're mostly doing it green, that's good. I know some of the doctors say it's like Dr. Esselstyn, the endothelial and all that kind of stuff. The thing, you could injure it, but it depends where a person's coming from, because if a person is willing to eat their fruits and vegetables, like in the salad form or however, I think that's probably preferable. I'm not saying never to have a smoothie, but I know from my own experimentation as a formerly obese person is when I went to True North as a patient in 2011, I had been having a smoothie for 8 years every day for breakfast, which was way healthier than my previous breakfast of Coke Slurpee, but I couldn't lose weight. And Dr. Lyle told me that when I got home to put everything, and I have smoothie recipes in my book, and he said put everything in the blender, but instead of pushing blend, pour it in a bowl and try to eat it. And when I tried to eat the contents of the blender, I got full at about the halfway mark, because so for somebody that's underweight or trying to gain weight, when you have a senior citizen that can't chew, when you have a kid that won't eat vegetables, I think smoothies are great, but I kind of look at them now more like treats, than what I'm going to eat. And I don't find them as satiating as potatoes, frankly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
all
if
right.
people like
now,
them,
if you can, and tell me if you got to go. I
That's
keep
all right.
you here all night.
no, I got. I got to get to Detroit in the morning.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We're lucky. We're lucky that you had that you're free.
Yeah.
So can you describe for us what happened as you started to embody these principles more? What happened in terms of health? You must have started dropping weight.
Oh, did
right?
I did. I mean, I lost 50 pounds, and I've kept it off now for 5 years. And I get to eat more because I understand calorie density, so I can eat a lot more fruits, vegetables, potatoes, rice, and beans than I could, peanut butter and avocado and Ezekiel bread, and even, these so-called healthy foods. I love it because I like eating a large portion of food, which to me is very satisfying, and it's very healthy. And my skin, I mean, I didn't have acne, but I don't know, something happened to my skin, because people are like, your skin is so good. It's just skin, so
I think it's the water content of the food.
Yeah.
But
hydration.
Okay. So first, let me ask you a couple of nutrients. Vitamin B12. Do you take it?
Yes.
And in what form?
I take it every day because I'm the kind of person that if it doesn't say it, I won't remember. Did I take it yesterday? Did I take, so it's one of those vitamins that's not like a fat soluble vitamin. So what's going to happen? It's going to get excreted in the urine. And when I get my physical once a year, it's really high, but it doesn't seem to matter. So I take a brand called Pure, Pure, which you can get at the True North Health Center and on their website. And I believe it's 1,000 micrograms. And I take the capsule. My husband prefers the drops, but I just take that every day. I've never needed to take vitamin D because, interestingly enough, I'm outside walking my dog for 90 minutes a day, and it's almost always sunny here, so I've always had normal vitamin D levels. If they were low, would I take them? Probably. I know that Dr. McDougall and some of the other doctors disagree on that, but I've never had to do that.
Yeah. Is that B12 that you mentioned, is that a methylcobalamin or a cyanocobalamin?
Hold on. Let you know in 1 sec. I don't have it memorized. Let's go get it. It says... Oh, wait, wrong bottle. Hold on. Okay, it is Metho. This is the one I take from True North, so it's Metho.
Okay, gotcha.
And I forget which one's better, but I don't know. I hear different things from different people.
Yeah, okay. I'm just curious. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So Metho.
All right, that's great. So, and then And this other one that kind of pops up now, I'm kind of curious about, but it sounds like you eat tons of greens.
Yeah.
So calcium is
Yeah, no,
never.
I don't take any of that, and I have DHA in my freezer should I need it because I'm not eating any added fat. But they do have a test now where you can test your fatty acid level, and every time I've had it, it's been normal. And I try to eat a lot of this thing called purslane, which is a green that's very high in this omega-3 fatty acid. We get it in California at our Latino markets like Super King and Vallarta. It's so
So
cheap.
you don't use flaxseed or.
I mean, I will use flaxseed and chia seeds, but a lot of times I'm not eating anything to put them on, because if I don't eat oatmeal, like, what am I going to put them on, and put them on I wonder how that would just taste on vegetables, I
Yeah.
probably should do that. But I do like chia seeds because I make dressings with them. I make things with chia seeds. That's a fun little thing to have. You can think of things with chia seeds naturally.
Okay. All right. So I guess one thing I do like to ask folks is if someone was considering making this transition to being vegan for the first time, what would be some general tips you give them when they do it?
Well, I would tell them now to eat vegetables because the thing is even if they didn't ever want to be vegan, I would tell them eat vegetables because most people don't eat vegetables. They eat in America less than 10% of their calories from fruits and vegetables and something like 92% from animal products and processed food. So I would tell everybody to just look for ways to eat more vegetables. And whether that's a salad or a green smoothie or making you can make a soup in the Vitamix, a hot soup with vegetables. It's delicious in 3 minutes. But I would tell people just however they're going to change their diet, find a way to eat vegetables because there is no diet style out there that says not to eat vegetables. Even the ones I completely disagree with, like paleo and the zone and, low carb, Weight Watchers, these are unlimited foods. So find ways to enjoy them and eat them, however that is. I like to roast them, but you can have them, if smoothies is the only way you can get them down at first. But that's what I think people need to do, Paul, is to think about instead of giving up all their favorite foods, just find ways to add more of these healthy foods, fruits and vegetables that people are not eating. And that's what I would tell people to do first because when you take stuff away from people, they get cranky and miserable and I have a program I run called the Ultimate Weight Loss Program where we don't have any of these foods like sugar or flour or alcohol. And people, they don't like it, especially if they've been eating it. I mean, they learn to like the food without it, but it's hard. So working with people that are not food addicts, I tell them just find ways to eat more vegetables. Try my balsamic Dijon roasted Brussels sprouts. There's no oil in them, but they taste like it has oil. So I try to give them delicious vegetable recipes, vegetable-based recipes, so that they can start swapping out meals. And make creamy curry kabocha squash soup. I do these cooking webinars where I make good food that regular people will eat, like my Chipotle bean burger. If you go to my television show, just Google Healthy Living with Chef AJ, I believe it's episode 6, I make these delicious Chipotle bean burgers. They look like burgers, they taste like burgers. I've served them to regular people, so find foods that are the most healthful form. I don't think necessarily just swapping meat for processed meat is, it's a way to go if you do transition, but I got to tell you, I've known people vegan 20 years, they haven't transitioned yet off the fake meats. Field roast is like, every meal is a fake meat meal. And, I forget what doctor that said, some of that stuff, especially the soy protein isolate, can raise your IGF-1. So I'm not sure that if health is your goal to be using a lot of those products. Again, you could use them as condiments or transition foods, use them at Thanksgiving, but we've got to find a way to get people all over to eat more fruits and vegetables. And, people will say, well, they're too expensive. I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be people that live somewhere where that's true, but we have the 99-cent store here. And I'm telling you, and I think I'd like to make a video of this. I could eat all my food from there. And a lot of it is organic. So you can get sometimes 2-pound bags of frozen vegetables for 99 cents. And Walmart, same thing. So, we have a regular grocery store called Ralph's. It's the same owner as Kroger, and I just saw the other day 10 bags of frozen vegetables, 10 for $1. So you're
not restrictive on frozen vegetables.
Well, I prefer fresh. I'm just saying for people that say it's too expensive, or I live in such and such a place where we can't get fresh such and such. Frozen vegetables and frozen fruits are picked at their peak of ripeness. They're flash frozen. They often have more nutrients than produce that's been sitting on a truck for a week. So, I mean, I do, yes, do I mean, except, well, corn to me tastes fine frozen, but I do prefer the taste of fresh better. But if I'm doing it in a soup or a stew, I don't have a problem with frozen. And Costco has these huge bags of delicious frozen vegetable, I think it's called the Normandy blend. So there's nothing wrong with eating frozen vegetables, but people are saying, well, it's too expensive to eat healthy. You know, of course, if you're comparing it to the dollar menu, you're probably right, but if you're eating grass-fed beef, that is way more expensive. You know, if you're eating the paleo diet, that's way more expensive.
Yeah, and statements like that don't take into account the cost of the illness that you're going to be suffering from later on.
When people say it's too expensive to eat vegetables, I say, well, have you priced cancer lately? Because that's really, really expensive.
Right.
And, you know, starch is the cheapest thing you can eat. I mean, you get a 20-pound bag of potato. We have a store here called Smart and Final, and I saw a 20-pound bag of potato for $5.
Yeah, you know, it's crazy.
Rice, beans, these things. That's why when I've spoken at food deserts, and you know, in the processed food is subsidized. You can buy this with your food stamps, but I remember at one point you couldn't even buy potatoes with food stamps. That's why that guy Chris Voigt, who was the head of the Washington Potato Commission, went on this all potato diet. He actually spoke at the McDougal weekend, and he reversed his diabetes and heart disease and lost weight because he was so upset that you couldn't use food stamps for potatoes. Potatoes are one of the healthiest foods in the world, which is why I would not want to be a raw foodist again, because to me they're the most satiating food, and
potatoes
that's what helped me lose so much weight. And if you don't like potatoes, eat sweet potatoes. I mean, the Okinawans, according to the Blue Zones, are some of the most longest lived people in the world. I think they eat something like, is it 92% of their calories from these sweet potatoes? Or maybe 72, or they eat a lot of sweet potatoes. In other words.
It was huge.
Yeah,
huge
and they're super healthy and super old.
That's right. Okay, lastly, let me ask you, how do you navigate the public? Okay, so you have all this information, you know how powerful it is, you know everything behind it, and yet you can go out in the public and there's resistance. You may sit next to somebody who's receptive, and then that's easy. What do you do when people are not receptive? How much do you sow seeds where it doesn't make any sense? Do you think it's worthwhile to be abrasive because you feel strongly about things?
I don't know if it's worthwhile. That's a funny question. Ask Dr. McDougall that, because I think your personality is somewhat fixed. Whether it's worthwhile, I think it just depends who you're talking to. You know, when I go to the store, which is often to buy food, I live next door to Trader Joe's, you can almost tell the health of the person by what's in the basket. Like you look in the basket first and then you look up, and you can often tell their size. And believe me, a lot of times I would love to just say to strangers, you know, you're eating that, you're feeding your kid that, but I tend to try to zip the lip, wear a vegan t-shirt, or try to look my best, and then have them, or even without a vegan t-shirt, like, so like for instance, I've got a really cool pair of shoes on and they're vegan. So I'll always have a cool pair of shoes on, and people will come up to me and say, oh, I love your shoes. I go, yeah, they're vegan. Like I always find a way to slip it in, and then starting to talk about the diet. But I don't know if being abrasive helps. I think it alienates people, and I do it sometimes because I don't care sometimes. I think it just depends on the relationship, if they're a stranger or if you know them. I mean, I have lost relationships because I remember a relative got breast cancer, and I suggested they read the China study, and they have not talked to me since that. I didn't say it. I said, oh, you know, I email. So it's tough. It's tough. So it's almost like... I guess sometimes it's better to say nothing, but if somebody's hearing me speak, they've either paid or they've signed up to hear me speak. So that's a great way to say the truth. It's just, I don't know, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I know that when McDougall, you know, he said that like he'll go around with Mary and he'll go, food poisoning, you know, he doesn't go up to the person, but, you know, you can't help but notice when, you know, when you see people like for example, I volunteer at a hospital once a week with my dog Bailey. And when I visit somebody that's gotten their leg chopped off from diabetes, you bet I would love to say this didn't have to happen, but I can't. I mean, I can, but I'll be dismissed. So it's very hard to not say anything when you know, but I guess people have to come to their own conclusions and go through their own journeys. I wish that people would see stuff that will help them, like this podcast, or, you know, read a book. Like the China study or see forks over knives. But even then, change is hard, and food is addictive. These foods, the foods that people won't stop eating are addictive. Potatoes, rice, and beans are, but the animal products, the dairy, especially the sugar, they say it's harder to change somebody's diet than their religion, and I wouldn't want to get involved with that either. So I think you just have to, what's the world, you lead by example. And that's why it's important for us vegans to not only to be healthy, because the other thing, and when you were talking about earlier, is I have known vegans that have died of cancer, and I know vegans that have heart disease and diabetes. And the problem is if you're not following a healthy vegan diet, unless you're living in Santa Rosa and seeing McDougall or Clapper or one of those doctors, most of us don't have vegan doctors that know anything about nutrition. And so you get sick as an ethical vegan, or just as a vegan, you get sick and you get diagnosed with cancer, heart disease, or diabetes, or autoimmune disease, and you go to one of these regular doctors, and if somehow it comes up about what you're eating, well, they're going to tell you it's because of this is how you ate. And they're going to, and I've seen people stop being vegan because of this, because they got sick. And if we could do the healthier version of the vegan diet, the unprocessed whole food plant-based diet, I think we have a better shot at greater health, and not to, it's so funny when people say, I've heard some ethical vegans say, well, people that are ethical vegans never go back. I'm not going to mention names here because it's not my place, but there's several well-known ethical vegans that are no longer vegan. I've yet to met a vegan that has gone vegan for health reasons that has gone back yet. So it's not true,
Yeah. That's a good point. That's a great point. Yeah. So, okay, AJ, can you tell the audience one more time your website and the title of your book or books?
One book right now, Unprocessed, and I run a program called the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. If you struggle with that, please check out my website at www.eat followed by unprocessed, eatunprocessed.com, and Google my television show, Healthy Living with Chef AJ. There's 13 episodes, really, really good recipes, I promise, and excellent guests like Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Joel Kahn. I had the 101-year-old heart surgeon from Loma Linda, Dr. Wareham, on there. A real fun show.
Great. Well, AJ, thank you for fitting me in today.
Hey, thank you. I mean, like when you wrote me, I said, well, I happen to look good today because I was supposed to go on a plane, so I was all, dolled
You
up.
always look good. You always look good. And the energy just comes through. So
hey, man, it's my diet. I mean, that is another thing. I mean, I am not on caffeine. I don't drink alcohol. I mean, really, the energy, that is the one thing. This food is whether it's raw or cooked, it still has a life force. It's not dead food. It's real food, and it really does give you a lot of energy.
All right. Thanks, AJ.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.